I do not need to employ any hyperbole nor find any fancy words to state the reality of the situation humanity currently faces. Our world is not a happy place today. Wherever we look and in whichever area of our lives to which we turn our attention, there is unhappiness, distrust, and loss of confidence in the structures that have guided the governance of the world since the end of the Second World War. Those were the words of Ghana's president at the just concluded United Nations General Assembly. The president did not mince his words in his speech and went ahead to tell the truth as it is. He directly spoke to past and current injustices meted out by the powerful nations to developing nations, particularly in Africa. He was evidently speaking directly to the USA and European countries with zero fear. The president also took a swing at the 78th Assembly theme, pointing out that it suggests things are seriously off-kilter in the world. According to him, the trust needed among nations for harmony is fading fast. The unity necessary for building peace and prosperity is falling apart, almost reaching Cold War levels. And what's the theme that hit the nail on the head? Well, here it is. Rebuilding trust and reigniting global solidarity, accelerating action on the 2030 Agenda and its sustainable development goals towards peace, prosperity, progress, and sustainability for all. That pretty much echoes what the president was saying, 100%. The president went ahead to point out that countries are not on the same page with shared values or common goals. The divisions aren't just about rich and poor or north and south. They're everywhere, even within well-off countries. Traditions are under fire, beliefs are up for debate, and spreading outright lies is somehow okay in some cases. While acknowledging that the UN has accomplished significant milestones, he did not hesitate to indicate how the initial purpose of the UN is getting overshadowed by powerful nations' unwillingness to push for reforms. These very reforms are crucial to address current global realities. He mentioned that this reluctance has resulted in a loss of trust in the United Nations and, in particular, the Security Council. Nana Akufo-Addo went ahead to narrate his country's experience at the Security Council. He expressed his dissatisfaction with how things are done at the helm. Just so you know, Ghana is the first African country to serve as a non-permanent member on the council, a position it has served for 3 times now. The president recounted how he witnessed double standards at play where the Western nations often preach about democracy but don't always practice it in the UN. He felt that they tend to prioritize their own interests over what's good for humanity. A good example of this was how quickly the Security Council approved sending the Kenyan police force to Haiti. The president continued to emphasize his long-standing idea of restructuring the UN Security Council to correct the long-standing injustice that the current structure and composition of the UN Security Council represent for the nations of Africa. He said his sentiments are set out in Africa's common position on UN reform based on the Eswatini Consensus. It is pretty sad that Africa, huge as it is, this massive continent with loads of natural resources and a big population, still doesn't have a permanent spot on the UN Security Council. The president insisted that the UN should restructure so that it reflects what it preaches: democracy, equality, and good governance for a more just world order. In a shocking turn of events, the president disclosed how major nations, especially the US and Europe, have consistently thwarted any attempts by the UN to intervene or resolve the conflict in Ukraine. He pointed out that these powerful nations only use their veto power when it aligns with their interests, which is truly unfortunate. The president emphasized that a more equitable representation of nations globally would significantly help break this deadlock and enhance the credibility of the UN as an organization. The president also did not shy away from talking about the wrangles in his backyard. He noted how countries in West Africa continue to lose territory to terror groups. He also acknowledged that coups have been used to address specific problems within individual countries, but he quickly added that coups are not the answer to current threats. The president then called on other nations around the world to provide their assistance in addressing the urgent issues in West Africa. He emphasized that nobody should undermine the efforts of regional and continental organizations when it comes to dealing with problems in West Africa. Many young Africans are making the perilous journey across the Sahel and the Mediterranean Sea, seeking job opportunities and a better life in Europe. Unfortunately, upon arrival, they often face unwelcoming Europeans. The president has recognized this reality but pointed out that the root cause of the desolate state of African nations can be traced back to colonialism. European countries plundered African resources while the United States forcibly took Africans from African soil to be sold as slaves in America, subjecting them to forced labor without pay. For these very reasons, Africa has not been able to develop at the same pace as the rest of the world. He strongly insisted that reparations should be paid for the slave trade. He pointed out that a significant portion of Europe and the United States has prospered from the immense wealth generated through the hard labor, suffering, and atrocities of the transatlantic slave trade and centuries of colonial exploitation. While the current generations in Europe and the USA may not have directly committed these atrocities, it is evident that the advantages gained from them are intricately woven into the contemporary economic structure of these nations. The president did not at all fear calling out those who may be against reparations. He explicitly stated that when slavery was abolished, the slave owners were compensated for the loss of the slaves because the human beings were labeled as property deemed to be commodities. Surely, this is a matter that the world must confront and can no longer ignore. The AU has gone ahead to authorize Ghana to hold a global conference on the issue in November in Accra. The president of Ghana concluded his speech by calling out corrupt African leaders who funnel the proceeds of corruption out of the continent. He also called to shame countries that receive and harbor such ill-gotten gains from Africa's corrupt leaders. According to a report by former South African President Thabo Mbeki, Africa loses nearly $88 billion annually due to these illicit financial flows. President Nana advocated for the repatriation of these funds to Africa. He believes that a collaborative effort between the African Union Commission and the OECD Secretariat under the auspices of the UN should be tasked with finding effective measures to halt these detrimental outflows. The president closed by highlighting the need to fast-track the realization of sustainable development goals, indicating that little progress has been realized. Finally, we witness an African leader who exhibits courage and boldness in speaking the truth. Through his words, the world is confronted with the hypocrisy of certain powerful nations within the UN. He fearlessly points out their misdeeds and firmly calls them to account. The need for more such leaders in Africa is evident, marking the end of an era characterized by leaders perceived as Western puppets. It's time for Africa to assert its rightful claims, expose injustices, and protect its resources for the betterment of current and future generations. Share your opinions in the comments section below. If you are not yet subscribed, consider hitting the subscribe button for more updates like this.